why anyone would want to be on a big ship in the middle of shark pee initially is beyond me. Hello everyone, author DL Tillery here, the Mistress of Horror, and welcome back to my channel. Before we get started, how about you press that subscribe button, ring that bell so you know when I'm uploading new videos. Welcome to Mistress, Mood, and Candlelight, where I cover horror movies, horror books, and horror video games while I put on makeup. We are going to be covering Man of Medan for the PlayStation 4, made by Dark Pictures. This is under the class of paranormal, but it's more of chemical warfare horror. So stick with me and find out more about this game. I did enjoy it when I played it, so I had to do a bit of a refresher because it was quite years ago. It came out in 2019. So I hope you enjoy this review of Man of Medan, and I'll see you on the flip side. Alrighty, and we're here, so let's prime for the premiere of Man of Medan. Let's start off first by saying, middle of the ocean. What are we doing? What are we doing? So the game starts off with a cargo ship in the middle of the ocean, which wouldn't be a big deal because it's a military cargo ship. My interest, obviously, in Man of Medan was because it's a Dark Pictures game. And as I covered Until Dawn, I did mention that they have a series of games that are connected. Though Until Dawn's a little detached, there are two games like that, Until Dawn and The Query, which would kind of be detached from this specific series, which you'll notice because in this series, like the characters are like the same hired people to play the different characters in the different stories. But anyway, I was interested in Man of Medan because it was part of the series, and I'm interested in anything horror. So it didn't take much for me to want to get it, obviously, you know. So that's not hard to figure. Man of Medan came out in 2019, so we are a few years away from the launch of this game since it came out. I beat it a couple years ago because when I first got it, I beat it not too long after that. So it's been a couple years. So I did have to do a bit of a refresher because it's been a minute. But yeah, you can check out Dark Pictures and see what other games that they have. They do have a slew of good horror games. So and they have another one coming out. We're kind of hanging in the winds on that one. It's supposed to be this year because they kind of release one every year since they started this series. But it looking like, if they do, it's always in October because obviously Halloween month. I'm waiting impatiently for it. The game starts off with a cargo ship. They are lifting cargo, putting it away, down into the bottom, in special rooms and all that jazz, and military. They are docked at the time because they're picking up the cargo. So it's still off in the middle of the ocean to me, but they'll end up in the middle of the ocean. So they're loading the cargo, and it shows that sequence. I'm most generally into horror that's otherworldly, so to speak, monsters, just anything otherworldly. When it becomes grounded in human reality, is my least favorite type of horror. I still generally like the game. I still, thought it's decent. I'm still going to check it out, even when it's thrillers, because I've watched so many different horror movies that was all types of genres, and even this genre that's my least favorite, which is long the thriller, more grounded in human reality. We are primed for the premiere of Man of Medan, so let's go ahead and jump into the story. It starts with not main characters. You know how these games are, they have multiple characters, and yeah, so we'll get into the other characters that kind of come to main, because they love to do these openings on these Dark Picture games where that these people are not going to make it. They're not going to make it. You start off after the cargo's being loaded. They go to another scene and they show a guy named Joe and his friend Obviously, they're military guys, and they're having beers at the police that's local to the docking station. And it's more like a Chinatown place, for the tourists or whatever. And it's definitely older time setting. Like, that it's a long while ago, because they do mention that while you're doing this little beginning sequence, that this is post World War II. So that should give you a time stamp of the year. So you have Joe, and him and his friend are having a beer, and then they go to these stalls where there's a woman who, like, where you supposed to do like a boxing game thing, and him and his friend walk up to it, and then he goes like, give me 50 cents so I could do this fortune teller over here. So he gives him the 50 cents. He says he'll give it back later. This is important for the next little part. But he goes and gets his fortune told. And then this is the part with, the usual dog picture thing, where you make a choice, what you want to say. They give you three options usually. And the third one is in the center is always say nothing. So you have two other options to say something, and you could choose to ask about your son for Joe, or you could say like, will I be rich or whatever. So if you choose the son, I don't know if it makes a difference. I think the fortune teller's going to say something similar. So he says like pretty much, oh, pick from the tiles, because they're using like these tiles for him to do his fortune. And he picks, and then you have to pick a different type one after that, dragon or whatever. And then he picks, and then it's this fortune teller says it's leading up to doom and death, pretty much. And he's like, what? What are you talking about? And he gets upset and jumps up, and then like kind of forgets about it, and then goes over to his friend who's at the other stall where the woman is. And then he said, I'm going to try this game, being all cocky and whatnot. And then he like boxes the thing. You can do the little sequence. This is more or less to help you learn to play the game and use the mechanics correctly. So it's kind of just tying in how to play the game with this little sequence here. So after they're done that, the woman's kind of like, oh my god, I gotta deal with these guys. Like, that part was funny. And they're speaking Chinese at this point. So it was actually quite funny. She's like, oh, these guys are so annoying. So then they head back, but they're drunk, which I'm sure is probably against their protocol. So they kind of get in trouble when they get back to the ship. Yeah, big surprise there. So they get in trouble, like and his friend like argues like, you said you gave him a 50 cent. I'm sure 50 cent was a lot to post World War II. So he was like, I'll give him my 50 cent. He probably could buy like, you know, a loaf of bread and pay his rent with that back then. So he made a big deal. He wanted 50 cents. So they got into a little scuffle. He pushes him, and he bumps into like probably a higher ranking officer, and he punches him and knocks the Joe guy out cold. I'm sure him being drunk didn't help. So he gets taken to sick bay, or I think it's sick bay, and the other guy gets, you know, taken to the bridge or whatever. Like, you going to get put in your room too. He gets locked in a room, and he gets taken to sick bay because they're getting on this higher ranking captain or whatever nerve. So anyway, so they that part happens, and then your character Joe, at the time, wakes up, but from a sequence of a nightmare, jumps up, looks around. He's in sick bay, so it's like bunk beds and stuff. And this is on back on the ship. They're already back out to sea, and he like gets up. The door is padlocked from the inside, and he's like, how is this? There's no one in here. So then he looks around a little bit. Then you could check the locker. So when you check the locker, a body falls out, and the key to the padlock. This is like a doctor or whatever. I guess probably the doctor for the sick bay. Well, he didn't make it. Before this complete sequence is done, you got to see them loading this cargo, finish loading that cargo that we saw earlier down to a lower room that has a slight leak or whatever in the room. I guess no one cares. And then they put that there, and it's like also 4 caskets, I guess, with soldiers who have passed, because it has the American flag over top of each casket. It's 4 of those in a room adjoined to the one where the specific special cargo went. Um, that being said, I'm sure there's some kind of leakage or something of some kind of greeny fog coming from the special cargo. Back to Joe and, trying to get out the room. So I'm sure these were not happening at the same time because he probably was out for a little while from what I gather from that. And then he gets the key, lets himself out, and sees his friend locked up in the room, makes a joke, and then he lets him out. And then they go on to explore the ship. Things are not what they seem. Something's going down. They can hear like gunfire. You can hear like voices, people screaming here or there, or fussing, arguing. There's an ominous feeling on the boat or on the ship at this point. Obviously, something's off. Everyone's feeling weird. So they continue to explore. Then they see the higher ranking officer before, but you kind of like hide so he can't see you. You have to do like the heartbeat sequence that we had to do in the other games. So he won't see you. He's obviously off his rocker. So he's like, and losing it, apparently. They avoid him, thank goodness. And then they tell it, everyone on the ship has lost their mind. You got, people murdered, all kinds of stuff. It's not good. A storm was raging at this point between all this, so hence why there would be a leak down in the cargo room. The toxic looking gas stuff that I mentioned earlier has seeped into the room where the 4 soldiers' caskets are. Yeah, it's not good. This is not good. This is not a safe place to be. Mentally unstable, losing your mind, and military grade weapons. Okay, we know something bad's going to happen. Your character like makes it to down to the cargo area where the bad stuff is like affecting things. You could clearly tell this. And he's already kind of like seeing things, like he sees like his son, I think, because there's like a little boy. He goes, you're running across stuff like a ghost or something. Like, like his kid isn't dead. So what's happening? So he's seeing things, and he gets down to the cargo space and sees his friend that was with him earlier like dead over on the ground. And then he like sees his son, what he sees like him laughing, and then he's like looking around, losing it, clearly losing it. And then he like notices his son comes into the light, and he looks like a monster. So he's like a monster kid, like decayed and whatnot. He's like, oh, what is on? So he takes his gun that he has, like his military grade weapon, and he shoots, blah 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 blah, like that. Doesn't really hit anything. Doesn't hit the seems somewhat ghost child in front of him that looks like a zombie, and he freaks out as the ghost monster child gets closer to him. He grabs his chest and has a pretty much heart attack right there. Like right there. Yeah, that's not good. So he's grabbing clenching his chest, and he falls to the ground. My boy is not making it. Goodbye, Joe. Good night. Now we going to get into the main part of the story for Medan. That was landing groundwork. And now we get to be the characters that get to decide. You decide they live or they die, because if you make the wrong choice, they're grass. Now we are in present day, and we're going to meet the characters of Medan. We have Brad, then we have Alex, his brother. So they show these two first. They are loading up a boat. A medium-sized boat. It's not super big, and it's also not super small. It's decent. It's decent sized. But again, I would not get on a boat in the middle of all that water and shark pee. I'm just telling you. But hey, do you? Those two are in there having the usual, having like a brother squabble a little bit. Like he's like, don't be uncool and stuff when my girlfriend comes. This is Alex saying this to Brad, and Brad is the one who wears the glasses, and he's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, okay, whatever. You're not cool, and you know it. So they are loading up their stuff, and then they're expecting 2 more guests, which will be Julia and her brother Conrad. Julia is Alex's girlfriend. I don't know how long they've been together, but he does hint that they've been having to deal with a long distance relationship. Finally, Julia and Conrad show up. Conrad's kind of like the jokester of the group. You'll notice some of the actors that are playing these characters because they are decent known actors in Hollywood. They get on the boat and they're kind of waiting for the captain. I don't think any of them ever met her before this because they seem to be shocked that it was a female. Her name is Fliss. And they seem to be in like the French Polynesia ocean offshore. Fliss, she speaks French. That's the other language in the game. Besides, we did come across Chinese at the beginning, which I think is cool when we get those languages in there besides English. Blue, boring in English. So they get on there and she gets on the boat. She's like kind of like they kind of have her character persona being like, oh, I kind of have a slight attitude, but I like Fliss actually. I mean, as far as the characters, I like Julia's annoying. Like she's like really annoying. All of them are kind of annoying, honestly, but Julia is one of the most annoying to me. I mean, they're all okay, I guess, but if I had to pick one, to be like, oh, annoying, and then it'd probably be Julia. Everyone has their problems, though. I'm just saying. They take off they're going to go diving. That's a good idea. So they're looking for wreckage, like wreckages other people found already or not found, probably more or less not found. And they do after they go out for a little while because the captain, Fliss, she knows that they're divers, but she thinks they're more beginner divers. But apparently, Alex and his girlfriend have done a few dives well before this one. So they do some talking on the boat. You can control the different characters. Or you have Fliss, and then you'll have this one, and you can talk to the other characters and find out a little bit more about them. They get out into the water, and then they're like anchored or whatever. And then they want to dive, and then they find the wreckage on this little meter thing that they're looking up. So Brad is the one that's kind of doing like the research type of situation. They have located this wreck, this old military type of plane or whatever. So they're going to go down and mess with it, which they shouldn't do. And Fliss is kind of like, don't touch anything when you're down there. This is an undiscovered wreck. And she wants to report it. They're like, no, don't be lame, blah, blah, blah. Not following protocol, but we're not surprised because they're Americans. They do point this out. Fliss definitely points this out. She's quite annoyed with them. And she's like, listen, we have rules and protocol out here, and we really should be following it. And they're like, well, we're not going to touch anything, lying through their teeth. We're not going to touch anything. We're just going to look. It's not going to be any harm if we just look. No one knows, blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, I should not worry about doing the wrong thing as long as no one sees me. This sounds like criminal activity. They end up diving, in the shark pee infested waters. And they go down, Julia and Alex, the boyfriend and girlfriend. So they go down, they're the divers. Comrade and Brad stay up top with Fliss, and then you can talk to each other. Comrade's trying to flirt with Fliss, but you can either decide let her be in somewhat interested, or you can make her like, push off out my face. I'm busy. And then Brad's like down reading, using his thing and reading blah 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 about the type of like plane that's under there possibly. So you do that back and forth, and then you're back down in the water, and you're now exploring the wreckage. So now that you're exploring the wreckage, they're touching all kinds of stuff. Julia's touching everything. If there's something there, she's touching it. And then they're going through, and it's murky and whatever, and they got their special, diving gear on, whatever, so they're breathing fine. And then they go further into the wreckage, and then they see, like, in the cockpit, the two dead bodies that are in there. There was another dead body before that, of decayed people, and then two pilots in there. And then they find, like, a like paper that's in plastic, so I guess that's why it's preserved, so to speak. It has coordinates on it, talking about some kind of gold. I can't remember the exact word. It's also them, and it's type of gold or whatever. And then the coordinates is to more than likely the ship that was at the beginning of the game, because apparently this plane was on its way to that ship. Maybe a rescue plane, not sure. But I gotta touch everything, and Mr. I have to also touch things. We could take things, even though we said we weren't going to. Liars. So they go ahead and and you know take that thing I just mentioned, take the paper, whatever, coordinates on it, and uh, for some reason Julia decides to get in the seat for flying the plane and pull on the controls. Like, what are you doing? Like, why would you do that? And then Alex is like, hey, be careful, and it starts shaking. And then the front of the top of the covering of the glass, where the glass would be if it was like still had the thing, falls off. And they're like, oh, we gotta get out of here because we could die. Like, maybe don't touch the controls of an old wreckage. Like, I mean, the IQs of these people, they're like, let's get out of here. And then they start swimming up, and then there's a shark shows up, and they're like, oh, and she's like, what? Come at me, shark. I was like, girl, if that shark wanted to get you, if it was that breed of shark, you would be over. You're not going to be able to do anything to it. Like, they got that little glow stick thingy. Like, if the shark won't eat you, it's over. Okay. So anyway, he was like, it's not that type of shark. It's a blah, blah, blah grade type of blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, okay, well, then they swim up. And then midway of swimming up to the top, they stop. Before this occurs, there's a speedboat shows up top where the other three characters are and crashes into the line thing that's there, and then pretend that it was their fault that he hit them. It's like three dudes on there, and ooh, very unattractive dudes on top of that. So they're pirates, obviously. And he like looks at them, and then Conrad gives them attitude. Like, he's like, look what you did to my boat. Like, you crashed into, okay, I see what you're doing. You're one of those people in traffic that like try to get in an accident so you can catch a case. Yeah, okay. Anyway, so he's like looking at him, and Conrad's like, "Oh, you want some money, do you?" And like takes out some water cash and like start tossing bills at him in the ocean. Like, yeah, because Conrad and his sister, they have like money, so their family does anyway. So he's like giving attitude, and Fliss is looking like, I don't think this is a good idea. She's from these waters. She knows the people around here are not playing. So she's looking like, oh, this guy. And then he's like, yeah, well, how about this amount? Tosses in the border, getting the guy attitude. The guy looks at him like, oh, I'll kill you. Now, as the two, Julia and good old Alex, are on their way back up, like I said, he stops her. And he's like, asks her to marry him while they're under the water. I mean, it's all clever and memorable and such. But like right now, for real, that what we're doing? Yeah, I guess that's what we're doing. So he's like mumbling over his words, and she's like, what's going on? And then he's like, oh, will you marry me? And you can't tell right now, but I'm down on my knees. I was like, good for you, buddy. So he does the proposal thing. You could choose to be like, oh, let me think about it, or you could say yes. So, you can just go ahead and just say yes. Like, they've been loyal for a while, so she probably would say yes anyway. So whatever. And then they like see an explosion happen on the deck of the ship. Like, what's going on up there? We have to decompress, he says. So they decompress, and then another explosion, slight, small, whatever. And then they get to the top while a speedboat goes away at the same time, like right after that. So they try to go back up, like, what's going on, guys? I want to get out the water. And they're like, oh, so it's just like, your brother blew up my grill. I'm like, oh, you want us to think that the dudes on the boat was like, we gonna take these guys out right now. That's what y'all was trying to do. Okay, you got us, you got us, you got us. And they get out the water, and they're celebrating, like, look what happened. I got proposed to, blah, blah, shows the ring. And then they're all celebrating and stuff. She's like, oh, that's great. And then they're back up topside. They're talking about what they found below and all that jazz. So Fliss goes off on them while they're in the midst of talking. And she's like, you Americans are so disrespectful to other people's traditions and beliefs, and you think you just come here and do whatever you want. I mean, preach. Because it ain't like she was wrong. So, you know, she's like, you shouldn't have touched anything. You're going to bring badness up here with you. Like, you should have just left it alone. And then she's like, well, Julia's like, it's not a big deal. Blah, big surprise. She said it's not a big deal. Anyway, because she just wants to do what she wants to do. And Fliss is like rolling her eyes and like, ugh, people. And then Brad tells a ghost story about a lighthouse and the dude and the woman and blah, whatever. This is irrelevant. So they do that and they're like, ha ha ha, laughing or whatever. And then they talk about the coordinates and he's like, how long would it take to get there? To Alex says 2+. And she's like, a couple hours or whatever. So there's a storm coming through, so they kind of like, well, let's go to bed or whatever. So they're all asleep below deck, and the storm is starting, blah, blah, blah. They're going to head off in the morning. I imagine that was the plan. And then a boat comes up. It's the Mr. Pirate Men. They're back. That's not surprising at all. You gave them attitude, and they're pirates. So they come back, and then they like wake up. I think it's Comrade, and you can fight them, blah, blah, but they still get you all, tie you up, put you in the room, y'all in your underwear because y'all was sleeping. And then your arms are tied up and they cover your mouth with tape. 4 of them end up in the room eventually. But you don't see good old Brad. Okay? Like, where is Brad? So they're in the room and then they're taking the tape off and stuff. And then there's 3 dudes. If I remember their names correctly, I believe the leader name is Junior, I think. I get Junior and Olsen mixed up because they didn't really clarify who was looking for at one time when they mentioned their name. But I think the leader name is Junior, the one with the like messed up vision in one eye, and then the other dude, his name is Olsen, and then the 3rd pirate, I call him, his name is Danny. Yeah, he has the same nickname as me. So I remembered his name easy. So they are there and they're like roughing them up and stuff, and then they bring out each one out of the cabin. They beat them up a little bit. They don't beat the women up though. They pull Fliss out and they kind of question her because she's the captain, you know. And then they kind of pull the tape off. Then they start trying to undo their hands, blah blah blah. Then you see Brad's hiding underneath a bed. So they never got Brad. Didn't know Brad was there. They never saw Brad even earlier when they came on the ship because he was down below when they were having the squabble earlier. So they don't know anything about Brad. He's still hiding. Comrade sees him when they push him back in, and he's like, "Shh, like don't let him know I'm here." Not that he's gonna do anything. He's Brad, so, so they put him back in the room, and they kind of come up with a plan to escape. So let's skip through this window over here. Okay, so they kind of break through the window, and Comrade is the one to go. Though before we get to that, the pirates are apparently trying to ransom them off because when they pulled Julia out the room, because they freaked out, they thought they were going to do something to her, but they didn't. They questioned her like, oh, about their family, their parents, or whatever. Yay! So now we're like hostage situations about to go down. Comrade actually goes out the window and escapes on the speedboat. You can try to grab the knife, or you can escape. Probably best to escape. So if you escape and you also do the sequence right of the button press, then Conrad escapes on the boat. They shoot at him, and then they have the 3 of them pulled up the deck. And then what's his name? Alex, some reason thought maybe that Fliss was in on it with them, and kind of much as accused her of such. And she's like, "Are you kidding me? Like, no." But meanwhile, before they pulled them all up deck, they found the paperwork showing the coordinates. So they're like, oh, someone's going to tell me about this gold or whatever. So then they pirate. So of course they're interested in gold. So they go to head there right away. There's a storm raging. They get Fliss to call over the thing about the weather. The guy on the other end is kind of like, Fliss, you okay? Weather never bothered you. So he kind of like, dude, like, don't you see anything? And unhooks it or whatever. So they finally make it to the ship. I told you that's where they were going. So they made it to the ship where the bad stuff went down a long, long time ago. Don't ask me why this like cargo ship is so magically still sitting where it was sitting like since before World War II, and no one has like moved it or like came on there to, you know, retrieve the bodies. Are they trying to act like no one? They said no one found the wreckage of the plane, so no one found the wreckage of this big, massive military ship that they knew was missing this entire time. So I mean, that's the story. So it's whatever, I guess. So anyway, they get to the ship, and then the pirates are like, get on there. He takes out a piece of the boat, but that's Fliss's boat, so that way it can't run without this, you know, piece. Well, he carries that with him just in case, I guess, they manage to escape, and then they won't be able to escape, you know. He's thinking ahead. He's a smart pirate. Then they put him in a room, and he's like, "Can I have a flashlight? We can't see in here. It's dark." He's like, "Yeah, his flashlight." That's what Olsen says. That's the second pirate. So they're in a room, and now they have to like, what are we gonna do? We got to figure it out. And then of course, what's his name? Apologizes to Phyllis about thinking she's and like, well, they're treating all the same. Like, you don't say, my dude. You don't say. And they're locked in a room, and then they can hear they've like this broken part of the wall, and they can hear the pirates kind of disagreeing. Danny, the third pirate, he he's like, we should this place feels weird. We need to not be here. I don't feel comfortable with this. And then the leader's like, "Did you shut your mouth? We gotta get for this goal. We gotta make money and stuff." Like, okay, dude, like, you're stupid, obviously. And your characters are trying to figure out how to get out of the room. So eventually, you do figure out how to get out of the room. You do figure out how to get out of the space. Brad is still on the boat hiding. He's like, "I ain't coming out. Not getting me." This dude's like, "I'm living. I don't care what's happening. Not gonna get me." And now they're exploring the ship, not by choice, mind you. They're trying to escape. And, they start, you know, coming up across things about the ship, about what possibly went down. Start seeing bodies, like disgusting, decayed bodies and stuff of people who died horribly, apparently from the mouth shapes and everything that they have, eye sockets and all this stuff. Very creepy stuff. And it's feeling all around the ship. Then the characters start seeing things and hearing things as they're going. And they see one of the pirates and the leader, and he's carrying the boat part. Of course he is. He sits it down on a crate randomly. This is obviously a trap. I mean, obviously, right? So of course, Liz is like, we need to get that. We need to get that boat part. Like, we really need to get that. And they catch her, of course, and then, well, where the others at? Where are the others? And they're hiding, like, oh shit. Like, so then they take her off, and then the other two are like trying to follow, you know, behind, but like at a distance, but trying to keep up. But of course they aren't able to. Julia starts seeing and hearing things. They somehow end up in the casket room that I talked about at the beginning of the game. And that's where the four, obviously, soldiers who have been killed in the line of action, their caskets are still there. And she's like, "Can we please not be here? We need to not be here. Please, let's just get out of here. I don't like it here." But my girl is seeing things. Like, this is not a good time for anyone involved. Somehow they get to a room that's quite clean. Like, it's not wreckage style. It's not like mildewed and wet and green. It's just quite clean. But there's a body on the bed, and it like next moves, and he's like, "Ah!" Alex jumps, and she's like, "Would you please?" Like, my nerves. So, but it's clean. It's very weird. That's off. So, then it goes back to our girl Fliss being pushed along by Danny, the third pirate. He's very on edge because he believes in all the superstitions things. And he's like, "I don't like it here. This is very nerve wracking," while pushing her along with her at gunpoint. So she's like, "Where are you taking me? Like, where are you taking me?" And he's like, "Just shut up and go." And he called for Olsen at one point, and they go deeper and deeper. She's like, "Where are we going?" He doesn't really answer. He doesn't know what's going on. But he's pushing her. She's in the front. So you're kind of like controlling the character at this point. Then they get to a point where he's like, I think the toxins is getting to him. The toxins, we didn't forget about those. And she's like, "What? What are you?" And they see a body. And the guy's probably down here with us. She's like, "You don't know what you're talking about." He's like, freaked out, superstitious, ghosts and all stuff freaking him out. Like, his mind is also going because toxins are getting him. They get to the point where they are at like go around the corner, and it's a dead end. And good old Danny freaks out about this. He's like, "What is going on?" And he like hits the wall with the butt of his gun, and he's like turning around looking, and Felicia is like backing up, like, "What's wrong with you?" And like kind of goes like around, like looking at him. She's like her back's at the dead end now. He's like facing the other way, and he's like like he hears or sees something, and he goes like and like runs off, and then he shoots back that way, and she's like, "What the is going on?" So yeah, he runs off. She eventually moves and looks around the corner and sees like his flashlight and his hat on the ground. So she's like, okay, this guy lost his freaking mind. So then you have control of Fliss again, and you're not being held at gunpoint. So I guess that's a good thing, right? Yeah. My boy done lost his mind. Fliss finishes exploring this section, and then gets to a door. She goes through the door, and it slams shut behind her. And she's like, you know, and then it switches to Brad finally. So now Brad's like, okay, like he checks the boat, like this can't start, this can't do anything because he took the thing. So he goes to gets on the ship with everyone else. As he is, you know, exploring and stuff, he comes across like this locker room area, and then like he opens one door and there's like a toilet in there with like blood comes out the drain. So and closes it. He's already starting hallucinating from the toxins. He finds a gas mask in one of the lockers, and then he takes that. Then he hears someone about to come in, and so you can hide. Then you have to do the heartbeat sequence thing that's been going on in the game. And then it's one of the pirates. I believe it was Olsen from his feet. They didn't really ever show him, but you can kind of like see his feet like below the lockers or whatever. So he hides, lockers and bathroom stalls, obviously. So he like stays hidden until he goes. So he's like goes and explores some more. And then he sees like a hanging skeleton out the corner of his eye. It looks at him, and he's like, ah, like, and no, this is not happening, no way. Like smart, he runs, he runs, and then jumps over the railing onto this like net that's holding rocks or stones, and then he kind of falls below. Then it switches back to Fliss here. So now she can't go back through that door; it's locked. Then she goes and explores some more. Then there's like paranormal activity going on. You see like ghostly see-through figures, and then she sees Brad as a ghost. Like what is going on? So then she follows that, and then she's exploring, see bodies and such. She comes across this weird, completely clean place that's red velvety hanging curtains, and like a theater part would be on the ship, I guess, for the entertainment of the soldiers, I would imagine. And like it's completely clean. Like she said, this place isn't right. This is so like this is off. But then she goes through a door or whatever, and she comes across Brad, like he's over there, she's not sure what it is, and he has like a gas mask on. She's like, Brad, what the what? She said, what's with the mask? And he's like, well, I came across it, so I figured I should keep it. Yeah, good call there, my boy. Brad and Fliss like find a hole in the ceiling, and they climb through that to get up higher. um and then there's like water, and then she's almost drowning at one point, and Brad's trying to save her, get her out so she doesn't die. Because you can really, some of these characters can die throughout. If you make the wrong choice or you mess up on a sequence or something, they can die. So everyone doesn't just automatically live in this one either. None of their games are like that. They can definitely die. So that that happening. So she is saved if you save her right here, and then they make it out, and then it switches back to Julia and Alex. And then they come across the pirates while they're crossing like this little bridge piece that's above water, and then the pirates hit the thing so they can fall, and they fall in the water, and then they're like, ah. And then Miss Julia is still hallucinating, so when she finally gets, like, she falls in the water, it kind of takes her back to the wreckage that they found under the water. So you're like swimming through there, and then you find like a body, and the body is actually, when she turns it over, it's Alex, and then he's holding the ring in his hand. She's like, oh no. And like then she wakes up, and then surfaces out of the water, and Alex is there, but then there's another Alex. She's seeing only Alex's face on these other people, pirates obviously. So the two Alexes are fighting. She's like, what's going on? Stop. And then the real Alex like gets her and like get out the water. But then the other pirate who has Alex's face gets up out of the water and chasing them. It's the dude, the leader. And so they're like running from him or whatever, trying to get away. The other Alex, who's the pirate really, who she's seeing as Alex, is pursuing them while they're running, and you have to do sequences and stuff and escape and choose to run or jump. You run and then you run again. So once you do that, then when you're coming down the hall, it's this really cool part where you see the curator standing at the end of the hall, like in his whole get up and stuff, watching, which is really cool, but it's real quick. Okay. So anyway, they make it through the door. Then they run into Brad and Fliss. Then they make it to the deck and a radio. So I think it's the weather deck or whatever. So with the weather deck, they find a radio, so they're trying to call for help. Midst of while trying to call for help and trying to get through some of the power goes out, so now they can't do that. Probably with the pirates, and so they have to go down through this hangar or hole is in the floor, and they decide who goes. They kind of have a disagreement about who goes or whatever, but it ended up being Alex and Fliss. As they're climbing down through the hole, it kind of like breaks, so Fliss falls, and then so does Alex. So they made it to the bottom. Brad checks on them. The two of them go off and start exploring, trying to find. Then they run into Mr. Crazy, leader pirate dude. He's completely off his rocker. They see him in a room murdering pirate number 3. Danny, the one who ran off, who lost his mind. He has him tied up, and then he like has an argument. They're speaking in French, and then he stabs him. He's like, please don't. And he stabs him anyway. And then he throws his body on the thing. And then he like looks around like, huh, huh, huh. And then you see some of the toxin green stuff like coming out of a vent and is like getting him. And he's like, ah. And then he grabs a sludge hammer. And then he like comes out the door and you're supposed to hide against the wall. I'm like, So he goes off and then they're like, we need to get the piece of the part. He left it in the room, but then he comes back for the can and they run off and then they're hiding. He's like, come on, we could just make a deal and stuff, right? Yeah, right, my dude. I'm not coming out so you can sludge hammer me. So anyway, they run, they run off and then he's chasing them and they lock the door. As soon as they lock the door, the other pirate number 2, Olsen, is on the other side. They point a gun at him. He's like, did the toxin get in you? Did the toxin get in you? Did it get in you? It's in you, isn't it? And they're like, what? Holding their arms, like, what are you talking about? Nothing got in us. We had this diving stuff because they found their diving gear that, for breathing. And they found that and they're just trying to trick him like he doesn't know about it. Plus, it's like, yeah, we have this diving gear and it can help you breathe. It can take the toxin out. And he's like, I don't know. He's like, what? And he's like losing it because obviously the toxin got him. And he's like holding the gun. And they're like, oh, this guy's want to shoot us. And then he's like looking around, like, oh my God, it's in me, isn't it? Oh, it's in me. Oh. And he shoots behind him. Then he's like, and he just ends it. He deletes himself. And I'm like, well, so they're like freaked out by that. Meantime, they're like, oh, the other pirate dude's finding another way around, so they're trying to avoid him. Now we're back to Brad and Julia up in the weather deck with the radio. So they hear banging and such. So then Brad is like, I need to go and check and go after them. It's like, yeah, well, hopefully nothing's happened. So he goes and gets down there. But after a little bit of exploring, he runs into Mr. Crazy Pirate Dude, and he's in the cargo space where the flooding has kind of always been happening, and then the toxins and stuff where they mainly are. So Mr. Crazy, who's lost his mind, is now swinging the sledgehammer at Brad. So Brad's dodging and trying to He's trying to get the part for the boat from him as well at the same time. So he's holding his own, like trying to avoid the sledgehammer and things like that. After you had Fliss and Alex, at some point, Alex and her got separated, and Alex is a little bit injured. He's up on like another part of the deck, and she is off on her own. She ends up where Brad is on the other side. When he's fighting or trying to avoid getting hit by the sledgehammer with Mr. Crazy, he hits the lock of the door like, I need to open it. He's like, I don't know what you do that. Like, so that water comes in and flushes in, knocking them both down. And once they get up there, sound of wrestling, he's going for the boat part, grabs it. Mr. Sledgehammer swings at him. At this point, Fliss is flooding in because she was on the other side of that space. And she's near the controls where the hangar door can be pulled down. This is important. So anyway, he is still avoiding him and trying to, fight him off as he's like pushing the sledgehammer near him and stuff. And he hits the toxin cargo, which leaks more of the toxin out into the water. So he needed that. He's crazy as it is. So she's about to press the button to drop the cargo door, and then Brad's like, hold on, or you can say hold on, not hold on. This could also get Brad killed if you do it wrong. If you're wrestling the guy, you get to the hangar door, she presses the button and it smashes the pirate dude. This is the last pirate alive. And you get the boat part, they take off running back outside. Meet up with everyone who's alive, because if you let people die, then whoever's alive is going to meet up on the deck. Okay, so if you did it good, depending on how your take on that is. You will have Brad, Julia, Alex, and Fliss meet up on the deck. So now they can escape. They get on the boat, put the piece in, and they'll be able to take off. But everyone's like, where is Comrade? Don't worry, we'll find out in a second. After they take off on the boat and they have left the ship, we see Comrade on another boat coming to the rescue and heading towards the ship. They get to it. I guess whoever the rescue team have, he gets on. But I think it's more of a horror thing that they're trying to pull here, just like an aftermath thing. I don't think they really would have let him go on in by itself because it's a rescue team. You know what I'm saying? They would have said, "You stay on here," and they would have went on. So he gets up on the ship. Not the best laid plan. And then he goes and he's like, "Hello," and a door swings open, and he turns around. He's like calling for them, and he goes into the darkness. After that, they go to a shot of the escapees on their boat with Fliss, Brad, Alex, and Julia. And Julia's like, "What happened to my brother? I hope he's okay." Like, I'm like, girl, he is not okay right now. So if this part is real, then he's on that ship and the hallucinants is still there. So, though again, like I said, I think it's more just the end of like horror stuff of what's going on. And then it goes to the curator. And my look is done for this one. I decided to go with a bluish brown mixture, if you couldn't tell that, and a nice blend of the two. Because of the bluish water first for the story, and then the brown would indicate the rusting and the dilapidation and the creepiness that occurred in the story. So I hope you like the finished look. The curator does his thing. He does his whole shtick. And he says how, there's always consequences to your decisions and such. And that ends the game. But they give you one more little sequence for your horror tastes. You get good old Comrade on the ship in a room panicking up against a wall, and then a nice jump scare at the end with an old weird looking lady thing real quick. So I think it was just mostly just a jump scare thing. I don't necessarily think that Comrade dies at this point. He is there with a rescue team, which they didn't show any of them at all. So I think it was just mostly just horror-esque type of scare stuff. Anyway, so let's assume they all made it. Not sure about Comrade, but we won't know that for sure. So that ends Man of Medan. I did enjoy Man of Medan, but like, it's one of my it's on the lower end of my favorites out of these because of the grounded in reality aspects of it. It's not technically paranormal because everything was hallucinant. It's more like chemical warfare than anything. It's along the lines of that, like infection of toxins and hallucinations, psychological more than anything. So it's not paranormal, even though they kind of label it under paranormal. That would be a reach, since there isn't really technically any paranormal activity in this. So, I'm more inclined and more lean towards horror that is otherworldly and monsters and things like that. They always lead at the top for me. Some people prefer this type of horror. That's not my thing, but I do also watch it and enjoy this type of horror. So I still will be interested in it, but it won't be on my top list. It's a good game if you haven't played it. It is on the PlayStation 4, but you can play it in the PlayStation 5 if you have that. So I am looking forward to the newest installment in this series still. I don't know what it will be about exactly. Speculation purely on the last advertisement for it. The last one that came out was called The Devil in Me, which also to me was a little disappointing because it also was not overly horror, more grounded in reality yet again. More like a serial killer thriller type set, which isn't bad, but also not what I want at the top. So, nonetheless, still a good game. You should check it out. I liked it. I will always buy horror games, especially ones in this series by Dark Pictures. So that's it for Mistress Mood and Candlelight, and I will see you in the next episode, which will more than likely be movie time. I'll see you next time. Stay scared.